Hello, everybody, and welcome back into the Baseball Podcast Network's weekly national podcast, BPN Weekly. My name is Benson Fector, and I'll be the host of your show tonight. No matter how you're listening live, archived, and wherever you may be listening from, I truly do appreciate it and hope you enjoy our next hour discussing all things Major League Baseball from the week that was in baseball right here on BPN Weekly. Settle in, we've got a lot to get into, and if this is your first time joining us on this show, the way that we sort of go about this format is we take a look at the standings for the week, and then we do a cool little what if the season were to end today. We go through a playoff bracket, and I give my World Series prediction right here, right now. Last week, my World Series prediction was the Dodgers sweeping the Twins. We'll see how it fares this week. Let's take a look at the standings and see how some teams fared this week. So, in the National League East, a big thing to note, actually, I think the NL East is done. This week convinced me that the Phillies are not going to be a team to compete in the National League East, as they dropped 6 consecutive games. They were 39-32 a week ago, only 2.5 games back of the Braves, but all the Braves did was go 4-2 this week, and the Phillies went 0-6. I think the NL East is just about wrapped up at this point, so chalk that up to the Atlanta Braves. And then in regards of some movement in the NL East as well, the Nationals are now in third place, sitting at 37-40, 8.5 back of the Braves, and the Mets are now in fourth, 37-41, 9 games back of first place Atlanta. Rounding out the division is the Miami Marlins, 15 games back of the Braves. And the NL Central, some news to note. At this time last week, the Cubs and the Brewers were all knotted up for first place in the NL Central. The Cubs now have a slim half-game margin over those Brewers, sitting at 42-35. The Brewers are 42-36. Rounding out the rest of the NL Central, we've got the Cardinals in third, a game and a half back. And the Reds and the Pirates are now tied for last place, rather than the Pirates being in fourth. They're both 5.5 games back of that first place spot. No changes to note in the NL West. It held serve this week. The Dodgers 54-25 in first. Rockies in second, 13 out. Diamondbacks in third, 15 out. Padres in fourth, 15.5 out. And the Giants in last place, sitting at 19.5 games out of first place. In the National League wildcard standings, the Brewers, and this is a change to note just because the Brewers now have that first overall wildcard spot. They have a 1-game advantage over the St. Louis Cardinals, who are a new playoff team in this bracket. They haven't cracked the playoffs since we started BPN Weekly, this being the 4th consecutive week. And the two teams that have those wildcard spots are the Brewers and the Cardinals. Then rounding out the rest of the contenders, we've got the Rockies sitting at 40-37, a half game back. We've got the Phillies sitting at 39-38, a game and a half back of those Cardinals. This is the first time since beginning BPN Weekly that the Phillies have fallen out of the playoff picture. Then we've got the Arizona Diamondbacks, who fell off just a little bit this week. They're now sitting at 39-40, 2.5 games back of that playoff spot. From there, we got the San Diego Padres, who, although their record may not show it, they actually climbed in the stands this week, 3 games back of that wild card spot, sitting at 38-40. The Nationals, first time they have joined sort of this playoff discussion, and it's real. They're sitting at 37-40, 3.5 back. The Mets, even though it was a rough week for them, going 3-4, they're actually a game closer to that second NL wildcard spot at 4 back. And some movers that are into the playoff picture again, sort of that contenders that weren't in the playoff picture in weeks past. The Reds and the Pirates have re-entered, both at 36-40 and only 4 games back of that second NL wildcard spot. So the National League is wide open. The NL Central is still definitely up for grabs. Teams 1 through 5 are 5.5 back in that division. I personally think it's going to be a 3-team race between the Cubs, Brewers, and Cardinals, but the Reds and the Pirates are only 5.5 back. If they have good weeks, they could very well jump into that discussion by this time next Sunday. And then you just see all the teams that are in the hunt for a playoff berth. Well, the only 2 teams that aren't are the Giants and the Marlins that are beyond those 4 games back. So definitely a wide open National League, and exciting to cover it as it progresses here in 2019. As for the American League, absolutely no movement whatsoever division-wise. We'll go over that. The AL East, the Yankees are atop the division at 49-28. Rays 45-33 at 4.5 back. Red Sox 8 back in third. Blue Jays 20.5 back in fourth, and the Orioles sitting in last at 27.5 games back. In the AL Central, the Twins are 50-27 in first place. The Indians 8 games back of them. White Sox 13 back. Tigers 22 games back, and the Royals 23.5 back to round out the AL Central. And then in the American League West, the Houston Astros are 49-30. Texas Rangers 6.5 back of them. Oakland A's 8 games back in third. Los Angeles Angels 10.5 back in fourth, and the Mariners 15.5 back to round out the American League. No movement whatsoever. The divisions are pretty much set. Besides the AL East, where it's between the Yankees and the Rays, and the Yankees are starting to gain some separation with some of their players coming back. So I wouldn't be surprised if we sort of have our division winners pretty much set by this time next week with the Yankees, the Twins, and the Astros. I do want to pay attention to the Rays still because they're only 4.5 back and still hold that first AL wildcard spot. They have a 2.5 game lead over a new team. The Cleveland Indians have now jumped into that second AL wildcard spot, sitting at 42-35. They took over the Texas Rangers, who have held down that spot surprisingly, and they're not far back. They're only a half game back. Then shaking out the rest of that American League contenders. The Red Sox are only a game back with the A's 2 back. And then some movers. The Angels moved ahead of the White Sox this week. Angels are 4.5 games back of that second AL wildcard spot. And the Chicago White Sox are 5 games back of that spot. So that, again, rounds out our sort of division standings check for the week. So, again, AL East, I think that's over. NL East, I think it's over. Chalk up the Braves. NL West, you can chalk up the Dodgers. And really, again, the only division that's going to be up for grabs, in my opinion, is the NL Central. And you got a 3-team race there between the Cubs, the Brewers, and the Cardinals. National League wildcard-wise, I mean, this could really go anyway. These teams right here, I honestly believe could fall in any sort of line in making the playoffs, not making the playoffs, however they end up. You have the Cubs, the Brewers, the Cardinals, the Reds, the Pirates, the Rockies, the Phillies, the Diamondbacks, the Padres, the Nationals, and the Mets. A lot of the National League is wide open. It's just a matter of who is going to take those spots and run with it. For most teams, we're looking at around that 80-game mark at this point, so around halfway through the season. This is the last week of June coming up. As we head into July and sort of into the time where teams are going to be starting to trading guys. So the only teams that right now that really are out of it in the National League are the Marlins and the Giants. And in the American League, there's a much bigger crop of teams that will be selling. You've got the Blue Jays, the Orioles, the Royals, the Tigers, and the Mariners. But still, a lot of teams are in there competing. The White Sox may fall out of that conversation at some point, as they're sitting at 36-39, 5 games out of that second AL wildcard spot, but 13 games out of the division. So they might move into that conversation, as well as the Angels. But right now, they're still in the thick of things and can still make that playoff push. So I wouldn't necessarily look for them. But again, it's going to be interesting to see this. The divisions besides the NL Central are all but wrapped up. It's just a matter of those two the two wildcard spots in each league. It's going to be exciting to see as that progresses and to see where teams shake up as we hit the halfway point here this week. Let's take a look at the playoff picture then. Always a fun thing we do here in BPN Weekly is take a look at the playoff picture. And yeah, if the season were to end today, how would that shape up? What matchups will we see? Exciting stuff. I like to do it. I think you guys like to hear it. So we're going to head into the AL wildcard game. It would feature at Tropicana Field the Tampa Bay Rays versus the Cleveland Indians. We would see Blake Snell going up against Trevor Bauer. As you guys know, I like to put a lot of credence on postseason success and being there and doing that. Trevor Bauer has done that. While this game is in the Trop, and the Rays have a very good baseball team, and they do have, Blake Snell going from the reigning 2018 American League Cy Young Award winner. It's Trevor Bauer, and it's an experienced Indians team going in to Tropicana Field, and it's not that hostile of an environment. Now, granted, this will be a postseason playoff experience, atmosphere. But I've got the Indians winning the AL wildcard game, moving on to take on the Minnesota Twins in the American League Division Series. In that first ALDS between the Yankees and the Astros, Yankees have home field advantage of this. In Game 1, we'd see James Paxton going up against Justin Verlander. I like giving Verlander the edge in that pitching matchup. Paxton doesn't have postseason experience. Verlander does, and it's pretty good, 3.19 career postseason ERA. Game 2, we'd see Masahiro Tanaka going up against Garrett Cole. Masahiro Tanaka's been elite in the playoffs. Garrett Cole's been decent. This Game 2, I'd got the Yankees taking that. Game 3, J.A. Happ going up against Framber Valdez. Again, I like to, even though Happ has that 5.48 postseason ERA, Valdez doesn't have the postseason experience. We don't know what he's going to be like in the postseason. Yes, this game would be in Houston, but I've got J.A. Happ and the Yankees taking that one, a 2-1 series lead. And then the way that we determine the rest of the series, if you're new to the program, is that we don't revisit pitching matchups. We review stars. Who's the star of each team and the star power, because that's often what plays in the playoffs. So best player for the Yankees, DJ LeMahieu. Best player for the Astros, Alex Bregman. Those two clash. Bregman wins out, so 2-2 tie. Then Game 5, so to speak, we got Gary Sanchez for the Yankees, Robinson Chirinos for the Astros. Sanchez is better than Chirinos, so I've got the Yankees winning that series in 5 games, moving on to the American League Championship Series. In the other side of the bracket, the Twins and the Indians, this series would be in Minnesota. Game 1, we'd see Jose Barrios going up against Aaron Seival, because Trevor Bauer would have pitched in the AL wildcard game. You get Barrios, who did get knocked around in his only playoff experience, but Seival has no postseason experience. He's still young. I've got the Twins taking Game 1. Then we've got Game 2, Trevor Bauer going up against Michael Pineda. Pineda doesn't have postseason experience. Bauer does. Got him even up the series. Then Kyle Gibson going up against Zach Plesac. Neither of them have postseason experience, but I like the Indians taking this game at home, 2-1 series lead. And then Game 4, Trevor Bauer, Jose Barrios. I like Bauer winning that matchup. So we've got Indians in 4 moving on to the American League Championship Series to take on the New York Yankees. So no Twins in this version's World Series. NL wildcard game, let's take a look at that. We got the Brewers and the Cardinals. We would see Brandon Woodruff from the Milwaukee Brewers going up against Miles Mikolas. Miles Mikolas doesn't have postseason experience. Brandon Woodruff does, and it's pretty good, a 2.19 career postseason ERA. This game would be in Milwaukee, as they have that one-game advantage over the St. Louis Cardinals. So, at the end of the day, it's in Miller Park. They got Brandon Woodruff. Mikolas hasn't been there. Super hostile environment. Gets super loud there at Miller Park. I have got the Milwaukee Brewers winning that game and moving on to the NLDS to take on the Los Angeles Dodgers. Let's take a look at the NLDS series. The first series we're going to take a look at is the Atlanta Braves and the Chicago Cubs. The series home field would go towards the Atlanta Braves. Game 1 would see Mike Soroka going up against Cole Hamels. Soroka's been great, there's no denying that, but Cole Hamels has that postseason experience, winning a World Series MVP, a 3.41 lifetime postseason ERA. He's been there, he's done that. Soroka hasn't. Therefore, I've got the Cubs taking that series, taking Game 1. Game 2 got Julio Teheran, John Lester. Teheran has a 12.46 postseason ERA. Limited experience, but still awful experience. John Lester, 2.51 career postseason ERA, and that's in a lot of games. So I've got the Cubs taking a 2-0 seriously, taking it back to Chicago. Game 3 would see Max Fried going up against Tyler Chatwood. Neither has postseason experience. Max Fried is hovering at that 4.03 ERA mark in the year. Chatwood's at 3.69. I like Chatwood and the Cubs sweeping the series against the Braves. The Braves just don't have the pitching experience and really the experience in general that the Cubs do. So I've got the Cubs sweeping and moving on to the National League Championship Series. And the other side, NLDS, Dodgers and Brewers. This series would home field would favor the Dodgers. Game 1, we'd see Clayton Kershaw going up against Zach Davies. Because Woodruff would have started in the NL wildcard game. Kershaw struggled in the postseason. Davies has not allowed a postseason run in his career. We've got the Brewers taking Game 1. Game 2 would see Julio Urias going up against Brandon Woodruff. Urias has struggled in the postseason to a tune of a 4.50 ERA. Woodruff elite, 2-0 Brewers series lead. Game 3, Walker Buehler going up against Chase Anderson. Anderson doesn't have experience. Buehler does. I've got the Dodgers winning that 2-1, and then we don't revisit pitching matchups. So what we would see... my bad. So what we would see in the situation, we do revisit the pitching matchups if it does come down to that. So we'd see Woodruff going up against Kershaw, and I've got the Brewers moving on and winning the NLDS, moving on to the NLCS to face the Cubs.